Lesson 2.7. We are looking at absolute value functions and their graphs. But we're going to be using that list of transformations from yesterday's lesson. So how we move left and right, up and down, how we shrink and stretch, or compress and stretch, how we reflect. We're going to be applying that stuff to this lesson. So we're not done with that list. So you'll either want to be flipping back if you don't know them yet, or having your formula sheet out. You could have that. Now, in order to talk about absolute functions and graphs, it would probably be helpful to know what this graph looks like. Should I turn the lights down a little bit? There's some glare. Yes. No. I should have done that sooner had I realized, but is that a little bit better? Okay. Unfortunately, I can't get rid of all of the glare, but get rid of some of it. Okay. I don't know if I just made things better or worse there, but. Okay. Any thoughts on what the absolute value graph looks like? Okay. So, if you don't know what it looks like, what's our plan to figure out what it looks like? No. I can't just draw any random line and hope it's right, especially when this isn't even going to be a line. Just saying. Okay, so in other words, insinuating maybe set up some values.
I was just about to say that too.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say. If you don't know what a graph looks like, no, you don't just get to draw something randomly and hope it works. Okay, we're going to set up an XY chart. By the end of the day, you'll have this graph memorized and know what it looks like. But now, I love 0. 0 is always a good number to use. Along with 0, we like some positives, like 0, 1, 2. And it's always good to use negatives. If you don't use negatives here, you're going to get the total wrong graph. So we need to use some negatives too. So I'm using -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Okay, so plug these values in. When I put in -2 in place of x, what is the absolute value of -2? +2. Because what do absolute values bars do to a value inside? Make it positive. What happens when we put in -1? What's the absolute value of -1? 1. What is the absolute value of 0? What is the absolute value of +1? What was it?
1.
+1. And what's the absolute value of 2?
2.
So I have these ordered pairs. Let's graph them. I would not use the word u. That will get you in trouble. -2, -2. So left 2, up 2. Left 1, up 1. 0, 0. Right 1, up 1. Right 2, up 2. Maddie used the word u. I have to veto the word u in this situation. It's not a u. It's a v. That is a specific point. A U would be curved. We'll talk about U's in another chapter. Okay? But this is a V. Now realize, that was not the straightest V, or I didn't hit the dots exactly right, but this V extends on forever, yes? Extends infinitely up, left and right. But that is a point at 0, 0. It's not a curve, it is a point. And we could keep making points up all the way if we wanted to. Okay? Did I get your question answered somewhere? Okay. Now, I do encourage you guys, when you draw graphs, extend it somewhat past your last dot and put arrows on either end. Okay, that is officially how a graph should look like. Okay, here's my recommendation. Memorize that graph. Know that it goes through 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, -1, 1, -2, 2. because we're going to use that graph as we do our different transformations. So problem 1a here. What is the graph of y equals absolute value of x minus 4? How is this graph different from the graph of the parent function, y equals absolute value of x? We have options here. You can start setting up an XY chart if you want. Honestly, I don't feel the need to set up an XY chart on this problem. What's the relationship between the graphs?
Are you going to answer that?
It's in the hallway, isn't it?
Yeah. Just watch 5.
Yeah, it's in the hallway. That's why I'm just waiting for it to pass. But okay, the problem with the door is open. You guys are much more distracted, but not a whole lot I can do about that. Okay, what's the relationship between y equals absolute value of x minus 4 and y equals absolute value of x? Hint, hint. Think about what we learned yesterday. Yeah. If you have a minus 4 at the end of the problem, away from the x, so it's not in the absolute value with the x, that minus 4 is going to take this graph and shift it down 4. Or actually, the more appropriate word than shift is going to be translate. That's our mathematical word there. So, it translates down 4 units. Okay, options here. One option, and here's I'll show my preferred option, but I'll show the backup plan. Think about where these dots were right here, yes? And if I just kind of put those dots in, okay, it's not going to be my final answer, but if I put those dots in at 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, negative 1, 1, negative 2, 2. What do I need to do? If this translates down 4, what do I need to do with each of those dots?
I'd say probably bring it down.
Bring it down 4. Or, even easier, take the vertex down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then have you figured out how you can count from the vertex?
Yeah.
When I say 1, 1, 2, 2, I'm basically going each time up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. So up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. And then also in my negative direction. Up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. I don't know about you guys, but to me that's the super easy way to do these graphs. Okay? Just taking that vertex, moving it down 4, and then redrawing the other dots. One thing I will say, obviously not anything that has to do with Math Excel, but when you do this for me on a quiz or a test or a worksheet, don't just draw your vertex and then draw a random V. I want to see some specific dots on that random V. Does that make sense? Now, okay, a couple of things. Okay, I use the word vertex. Do you guys know what I mean by the word vertex? Where's my vertex? It's this point here, yes? Could you give me the ordered pair for this vertex and this point in this graph if asked? What is my vertex? Okay, my vertex, I go left to right 0, down 4, and so my vertex is 0, negative 4. Why am I putting this in here? Because Math Excel is going to talk about it if I recall correctly. Okay? Now, this next phrase is usually more reserved for parabolas, but we're going to talk about it with the absolute value of V's also. Axis of symmetry. What do I mean by axis of symmetry? Again, I think of it more with parabolas, not as much with my absolute value V's, but I believe they asked you for it today, some in homework, so I'm trying to prepare you. Okay, Maddie? Okay, so the same on both sides, right? So where is my axis of symmetry? In other words, what line splits this V so it's the same on both sides?
The Y.
Okay, the y-axis, right?
Yeah.
What is the equation for that y-axis? It's a vertical line, goes through what number on the x-axis?
0.
0. So the axis of symmetry is x equals 0. An axis of symmetry is always a vertical line. It's always x equals what number, ever number it goes through. It's also always the first number in your ordered pair. So if your vertex is 0, -4, then automatically I know my axis of symmetry is x equals 0. Yes, you could also tell me it's the y-axis. I wouldn't argue that, but to write the official equation, it's x equals 0. Now, one last thing that if it was up to me, I wouldn't worry about, but I'm going to because Math Excel asked it. I am going to write down an XY chart here. Notice though, am I saying you have to have an XY chart when you do this? Normal situation, no. I did that perfectly fine without an XY chart. I'm fine with you guys doing exactly what I did. Now, some of you may not be fine with it though. Some of you may say, yeah, I didn't like that, Mrs. Sargent. Give me an XY chart any day. Well then, here you go. Let's talk about an XY chart. What X values are good to use?
0, 1, 2, negative.
0, 1, 2, -1, -2. And that works as long as we're only moving up or down. If you start moving left or right, you have to be careful. Okay, now, if you are thinking this XY chart is a waste of time, then you can just grab your ordered pairs from here and transfer them over your chart. However, if you're thinking, I might actually use an XY chart, okay, work with me. What do? We take the -2, we put it in here. What's the absolute value of -2? 2. And then 2 minus 4 is -2. Put in -1. Absolute value of -1 is 1. 1 minus 4? -3. 0. Absolute value of 0 is 0. 0 minus 4? -4. Put in 1 and it's going to be 1 minus 4 is -3. Put in 2. 2 minus 4 is -2. Do those XY values match up with what's in my V? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I am okay if you have an extra set of dots here that were your original dots. I'm okay if you leave those in there. If you get to the point you feel like, yeah, I don't really need those in there. I know what I'm doing without them. That's fine. Questions on that one? There's a lot of information, but I do feel like it's not a bad lesson at all. Okay, let's look at B. What is the graph of y equals absolute value of x plus 2? How is this graph different from the parent function? Eli? He says left. What do you think? How do we know?
It's positive. It's opposite what you think.
Okay. And before we even go there, the fact it's positive and opposite what you think, where is that plus 2? It's in the absolute value. So that's like being in the parentheses with x or in the square root sign or whatever. So it's in with the x. Since it's in with the x, this is our left-right option. And as I always say, opposite the direction of the sign. So I do agree. This is going to go left 2. So I'm going to write that down, that we're going to translate left 2 units. Okay. How do you feel? Do you want to put the original V on here? Because here's an option. You can put those original V, although honestly, did I move each and every point last time individually? I didn't really. I moved my V and then put my new points from there. Or I moved my vertex. So my vertex is normally at 0, 0. Where's it going now? Left 2. So there's my new vertex. What do the sides of my V do? They go up 1 over 1, right? Up 1 over 1, and technically it's up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, and then also the other way, yes? So from this point, I would go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. Yes?
Earlier, I tried doing I tried doing X1 chart on this one, and it did not work out at all.
Did you get a straight line?
Something like that.
Okay, so here's the thing, guys, and we'll get to the XY chart here in a moment, but when you start moving things left and right, you have to adjust what X values you use. Because if we only use -2 through 2, look at what -2 through 2 is going to give me. It's going to give me that part right there. Do we know that that's the end, the vertex of my V, and that my graph is going to turn? No. And so that's part of the reason I'm not a huge fan of that XY charts here. So, okay. Let's talk vertex. Where is my vertex on this V?
Zero, negative 2.
2, 0.
Negative 2, 0.
Okay, I heard both.
Yeah, wow.
-2, 0, because you have to go left 2 and then up or down 0. Now, if -2, 0 is my vertex, what about my axis of symmetry? What was it?
Negative 2.
X equals 0.
Okay, so yeah, don't forget it's an equation, so always start x equals. But key here, where is this centered at? It's centered on what line? That -2 line. Or what was the first number in your vertex? -2. So x equals -2. Okay, probably about the last XY chart I'm going to use on this one. If you're just going up and down, or if it's just a normal centered vertex or absolute value V, I'm fine with -2 through +2. However, in this case, it's not that. If we're looking at these values, we moved left 2. So instead of starting at -2, where should I really start? -4. And do -4, -3, -2, -1, and 0. If you only use -2 to +2, you're going to get a straight line. And I'm going to have to count you wrong. So when we put in -4, now, this is important. Even though I'm not a huge fan of the XY charts on these, this is important. When we put in -4, what's the first thing I do with that -4? No. What's the first thing I do with -4? It's not turn it +4. You add the 2. You get that value inside the absolute value, and then we apply absolute value. And it's going to make a difference. Because if I do, what is -4 plus 2? -2. What's the absolute value of -2? +2. What would you have gotten if you did this the other way around? +6. Okay, so when you're putting in things, think those are like parentheses. You do what's inside first and then apply the absolute value. So -3. -3 plus 2 Negative 1, absolute value of negative 1, positive 1. Negative 2 plus 2, 0. Negative 1 plus 2, 1, absolute value is 1. And then 0 plus 2, 2, absolute value 2. Do those match up with the points in my V? Yeah, if you've gotten 6, you should be concerned because did we ever go 6 high? We did not. Okay. I think that is an awesome place to stop. Tomorrow at the start of class, I'm going to ask you to try and do 2A on your own while I'm taking attendance because I think you guys can do it. Okay? Homework will not be due until Friday or Monday, depending on how I decide to put it in, so you don't have to worry about tonight. I will talk about e-learning tomorrow. Yeah.
So, why are we doing e-learning tomorrow?